Sales outsourcing, scaling your team without hiring. Why B2B teams are scaling outbound without adding headcount. Most B2B revenue leaders are balancing the same tension. Pipeline targets keep rising while hiring feels slower, riskier, and more expensive than it used to be. SDR comp has climbed, ramp time is longer, and turnover keeps resetting progress. That's exactly why sales outsourcing has moved from nice to try to a mainstream lever for scaling outbound. The key shift is adoption. Roughly 38% of B2B SaaS companies now outsource part or all of their SDR operation, which is a strong signal that SDR outsourcing is no longer experimental. It's a standard operating option for building pipeline. When budgets are tight and CAC scrutiny is high, leaders want predictable unit economics more than they want a bigger org chart. But the goal isn't to replace your team with an outsourced sales team. The goal is to add capacity quickly, often through an SDR agency, outbound sales agency, or cold calling agency, while keeping quality high and staying aligned with your AEs. When done right, outsourcing is a strategic scaling mechanism, not a last-minute Hail Mary. What sales outsourcing actually means in 2025. In B2B, sales outsourcing usually refers to outsourcing top-of-funnel execution, not the entire revenue motion. That can include prospect research and list-building services, cold email agency work, sequencing, deliverability, copy, and B2B cold calling services, dialing, objection handling, and discovery to handoff. In other words, you still own the strategy and the close. Your partner operates the pipeline creation engine. This is also why titles can get confusing. One provider might position itself as a B2B sales agency or sales development agency, while another markets cold calling services or pay-per-meeting lead generation. The practical difference is scope. Are you buying only appointment setting or a full SDR pod that includes targeting, messaging, outreach, qualification, and reporting? A modern program should feel like a remote extension of your team, not telemarketing or telesales volume for volume's sake. The best cold calling companies and SDR agencies bring their own management layer, outbound infrastructure, and process, then plug into your CRM and your AE feedback loop, so the work translates into opportunities, not just booked calendars. The economics: measure cost per qualified meeting, not cost per seat. If you're comparing a monthly agency fee to a monthly SDR salary, you're comparing the wrong things. The real benchmark is cost per held, qualified meeting and cost per dollar of pipeline created. Once you account for tools, data, taxes, benefits, enablement, and manager time, a fully loaded in-house SDR commonly lands in the $110 to $150K per year range, which is the baseline you should use for decision-making. Unit economics get clearer when you translate costs into meetings. Current benchmarks often put an in-house SDR at around $11,500 a month, fully loaded, versus an outsourced SDR retainer closer to $5,000 a month, with cost per qualified meeting frequently falling around $821 to $1,150 in-house versus $357 to $500 outsourced at similar output levels. That gap is why many teams choose to outsource sales development even when they could afford to hire SDRs. Here's a simple way to frame the comparison for your model before you hire SDRs or sign a sales agency contract. Speed and stability. Ramp time and turnover change the math. Even if you can hire quickly, productivity still lags. Data points commonly show SDRs need about 3.2 months to reach full productivity, and broader SaaS sales ramp can stretch much longer, meaning you're paying for capacity before you're getting outcomes. Outsourced programs can often launch in weeks because the reps, managers, and systems already exist. Tenure makes it tougher. Research frequently pegs average SDR tenure around 14.2 months, which means many teams spend a material portion of the year recruiting and re-ramping instead of compounding results. If your sales motion depends on consistent prospecting volume, this churn creates a predictable pipeline wobble that shows up quarter after quarter. Turnover also carries a real price tag. Sales role turnover is often cited at roughly 35% annually, and replacement costs can reach around $115K when you factor in recruiting, onboarding, and lost opportunities. That's why many leaders treat outsourced sales as a way to stabilize pipeline generation while keeping internal AEs focused on closing. If you're measuring cost per seat, you're optimizing the org chart, not the pipeline. How to launch an outsourced SDR pilot that stays measurable. The cleanest way to start is a narrow, time-boxed pilot. Pick 1 or 2 ICP slices, one clear offer, and a defined region or segment so you can interpret results quickly. Treat it like a controlled experiment. You're not trying to boil the ocean. You're trying to validate whether an outsourced B2B sales outsourcing motion can beat your current cost per meeting and cost per pipeline dollar. Before outreach begins, document qualification rules in writing and make them enforceable. Spell out required firmographics, buying roles, pain signals, and minimum next steps for a meeting to be accepted. Then align AEs to the same rubric so you don't end up with 2 definitions of qualified. This one step prevents the most common failure mode: high meeting volume with low opportunity conversion. Finally, build a shared scorecard and operating rhythm. Weekly reporting should include activity and quality, dials, connects, replies, meetings booked, meetings held, and downstream impact, opportunity rate, pipeline per meeting, and cost per opportunity. If your provider is truly operating as a sales development agency, not just pay per appointment lead generation, you should also be reviewing call recordings and iterating scripts and cold email copy inside the first 30 days. Best practices that make outsourced SDRs feel like an extension of your team. Outsourcing works best when you stop treating the provider like a vendor and start treating them like a remote SDR pod. That means direct access to your positioning, your best discovery questions, and real examples of wins and losses. The fastest quality lift usually comes when AEs provide tight feedback on meetings within 24 to 48 hours, so the cold callers and outbound team can adjust targeting and talk tracks immediately. You'll also get better outcomes when the outsourced team plugs into your systems instead of operating in a silo. Shared Slack or Teams channels, calendar hygiene, CRM notes, and consistent handoff rules reduce friction and improve show rates. When your outsourced sales team can see what happens after the meeting, opportunities created, stages advanced, deals won, they can optimize for revenue, not just activity. This is where many cold calling services and cold email agency engagements separate into good and great. Great teams run multi-channel sequences, coordinate messaging across email and B2B cold calling services, and adapt by persona. They also protect your brand by keeping outreach professional, compliant, and consistent with how your internal team communicates. Common pitfalls: why outsourcing fails and how to prevent it. Most failures aren't because outsourcing doesn't work. They're because the program isn't managed. Weak onboarding leads to generic messaging, which leads to low connect rates and unqualified meetings. Set it and forget it management then locks those problems in place for weeks, and teams conclude that outsourcing is the issue when the real culprit is a lack of alignment and iteration. Another frequent problem is misaligned incentives. If you buy a low-cost appointment setting model without strong qualification standards, you can end up paying for meetings your AEs won't accept, especially in complex or high ACV motions. The fix is simple but non-negotiable. Define qualified in detail, track held rate, and measure opportunity rate and pipeline per meeting by source so you can spot quality issues early. Finally, don't ignore data and brand risk. You're trusting a partner with prospect data, deliverability reputation, and compliance exposure. So you should vet processes around GDPR, CCPA, TCPA, opt-outs, and call recording. Reputable providers are transparent about tooling and security. If a B2B sales agency can't clearly explain how they handle data, that's a signal to keep looking. Optimization. Use outsourcing to test segments and upgrade your stack. One of the most underused advantages of outsourcing is speed of learning. If you're entering a new vertical, launching a new offer, or exploring a new region, outsourced SDRs let you de-risk the bet without committing to permanent headcount. In a 60 to 90-day window, you can validate ICP response, messaging resonance, and whether your unit economics are workable before you decide to hire SDRs internally. Outsourcing can also upgrade your tech stack by proxy. Modern outbound depends on a messy combination of dialers, enrichment, sequencing, deliverability infrastructure, and reporting, tools that are expensive to buy and painful to operate. Many SDR agencies bundle these capabilities into the retainer, which can be a practical way to access better outbound infrastructure without creating more RevOps overhead. This is also where a specialist like SalesHive can add leverage. We combine cold calling agency execution, cold email agency sequencing, and list building services into one coordinated program, so you're not stitching together 5 vendors. Across SalesHive.com programs, we've booked 117K plus B2B meetings for 1,500 plus clients, and the through line is consistent iteration. Scripts, sequences, targeting, and handoffs get better every week when you operate off a shared scoreboard. Next steps. Decide your long-term mix and scale responsibly. Outsourcing is rarely an all-or-nothing decision. Hybrid models often perform best. Outsourced SDRs handle top-of-funnel prospecting and early access, while internal teams work warm inbound, strategic accounts, or later-stage consultative cycles. This structure keeps costs predictable while preserving deep product expertise where it matters most. As you plan capacity, remember that outsourcing is part of a broader business trend. Around 66% of U.S. companies outsource at least one business process, and roughly 70% cite cost savings as the primary driver. Sales development fits that pattern because it's specialized, process-heavy, and sensitive to scale. The practical takeaway is to treat sales outsourcing like any other performance channel. Benchmark, test, iterate, and scale what works. Your immediate action is straightforward. Calculate your true in-house cost per qualified meeting, run a tightly scoped outsourced pilot, and make the decision with downstream KPIs, opportunity rate, pipeline per meeting, and close rate, not vanity metrics. If you're evaluating partners, look beyond SalesHive pricing pages and SalesHive reviews style comparisons, and ask for clarity on qualification, reporting, tooling, and cadence. The right provider won't just promise meetings, they'll show you how they convert outbound activity into pipeline you can forecast.